backed, what difference is that going to make?
Well, it gives the government a possibility of doing what we've asked them to do all along, which is to pause this process. It's pretty clear from all that's going through Parliament just now in coming weeks that the government has not yet planned for what's going to happen. Things are going through all these delegated legislation committees all the time, but we're running up against this timetable that the government has imposed upon itself. We've not got enough time to plan, and this allows at least a bit of extra time should the government wish to do that to get this right.
You are both parties to this contempt action against the government today. What's that actually going to achieve?
Well, the government needs to be held to account for this because the government failed to oppose the motion that was put before the House, asking for the papers to be published, for the legal advice to come ahead. They haven't done that, and it's perfectly right that Parliament now holds them to account on that.
And we're also joined by Nigel Dodds here. Welcome to you. And you're united with your colleagues here on this, that you want to censure the government today in this motion on contempt of Parliament.
Yes, we've been very clear from the outset that the full legal advice needs to be published. After all, the Cabinet members are busy selectively leaking parts of it, so MPs and the public deserve to have it all. Can't see any good reason why it shouldn't be published, and even members on the government's own side were saying that yesterday as well.
Aren't you supposed to be supporting the government in the DUP?
Well, we support them on certain issues. When it comes to Brexit, we had an agreement on shared priorities. If they decide to do something else, that's up to them.
And what about the big vote? Are you all going to be on the same side voting down the meaningful vote to approve the deal?
Yes, I mean, we don't accept that Theresa May's
not
deal.
Abstaining, voting down?
No, we'll not be abstaining. We'll be voting down the deal.
Yeah, we'll be together.
The deal is entirely inadequate and fails to meet the aspirations of the people of Scotland.
Now, I want to ask you all, maybe a bit of disagreement here. Do you think that the whole Brexit process is going to help the cause of nationalism in Scotland, or indeed in Wales, or in Northern Ireland?
Well, we were very clearly promised in 2014 that the only way to protect our EU membership was to remain in the UK, and that is demonstrably not true. And people in Scotland can reserve the right, I believe, and we have a mandate from the Scottish Parliament elections in 2016 to re-examine this issue if we're taking out of the EU without
But do you think it
against our
has
will.
livened up the issue from the vote in 2015?
It certainly has, and people are re-evaluating, I suppose, the opinions that they had in 2014, because people believed very strongly that EU membership was important, and they still do. And they do not see, many people do not see a way of maintaining that membership the way that the UK is behaving.
I mean, Wales, of course, voted for Brexit. Do you feel that it is energising those people who think that maybe there needs to be more devolution or even separation from Wales?
Well, I think public opinion in Wales has changed quite substantially. And if anybody had cared to look through all the documentation that we've had to look through, for example, the 555 pages, you find no reference whatsoever to the devolved governments there. So I think, the governments here are behind the curve on this. People want more power locally, and they see power being drawn back into Westminster. Things are changing.
What about Northern Ireland? Could it be an unwanted byproduct?
Well, unlike Wales, I don't think anyone can say the withdrawal agreement doesn't deal with Northern Ireland. The backstop, 180-odd pages. But look, I mean, there's no doubt, as we're in this period of uncertainty, what will eventually come out of the Brexit negotiations and all the rest of it, it has undoubtedly created a lot of debate and issues about the border in Northern Ireland. But I think that will settle, and I think the main opinion polls that have been done in Northern Ireland show no real shift in the underlying patterns of support for the Union and for nationalism in Northern Ireland. But we need to get through this period of uncertainty and get to the other side. That's what everybody craves, and that's what we all want.
I mean, for example, if you look at the long-held views of Jeremy Corbyn, if as a result of this process Labour were to be in government, perhaps with the passive support of the SNP, it's quite likely you'd face a border poll in Northern Ireland, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. Jeremy Corbyn came to Belfast in the summer and he addressed Queen's University, and he was asked about all of this, and he gave a very firm commitment that he would abide by the terms of the Belfast Agreement and subsequent agreements, St Andrews and all the rest of it. And he wasn't rushing into saying things that would be outside the terms of the agreement, because a border poll in the current circumstances, even the Irish Foreign Minister and the Taoiseach have both said is not within the terms of the Belfast Agreement. So, Jeremy Corbyn has held to that, and some of the stuff that he's been saying on this Brexit deal that Theresa May has negotiated has actually been about not creating borders in the Irish Sea. So let's wait and see. Look, politics is very fluid at the
But that would make you a bit more
relaxed
relaxed about the possibility of bringing about a Labour government.
I'm not relaxed. I'm watching vigilantly on behalf of Northern Ireland what happens, and we will guard our interests very, very carefully.
And if you look at the electoral mass, it's quite likely Labour would need the support of the SNP in government, and presumably your Price would be wanting to have another IndyRef too.
Well, we'll deal with that as and when it comes. And the Labour Party have been pretty inconsistent on this so far, with Emily Thornberry saying one thing and John McDonnell saying something else. But what we want to achieve is the best for Scotland in all of this. We've always said we'd be happy to work with Labour in a sort of progressive alliance on these issues, and we'd certainly do a whole lot better of a job than the Tories are doing just now.
What do you think, Ms Williams? When do we like to have votes in Northern Ireland or indeed in Scotland?
Well, I mean, the point is that's implied. We have worked with Labour in government in Cardiff previously and made various offers to them in the past when there was a minority government. So obviously we'd be wanting to work with them for the sake of the Welsh economy and the UK in general, of course. But as yet, at least, the silence is from their side rather than ours.
You could be the swing in the vote a week today. What would you need to come in and support the government in the DUP?
Well, I think it's very, very important from our point of view that this issue of the backstop is addressed. That's the flaw in this whole withdrawal agreement. I think that's recognised on all sides, that binding the UK into arrangements, which is actually worse than staying in from a lot of people's point of view. You're bound into the rules and accepting the laws and regulations.
Did you buy this argument from Geoffrey Cox, the Attorney General, yesterday, that actually probably doesn't matter so much because neither side want to end up in the backstop?
It's intriguing that having spent 18 months negotiating this and using all sorts of threats about no deal, that suddenly nobody wants it. I mean, that really is an amazing argument. But look, as a lawyer myself and as Geoffrey Cox's lawyer, we're dealing with laws here. We're dealing with internationally binding text. We have to address it as it is and what happens if it comes into force, not on the basis of, well, it may turn out that nobody wants it. It may turn out that they do want it. And in that case, we will have set our hands to something that we need to be very, very careful about. So I think it's the duty of all MPs to examine the text in front of them on the basis that it might well come into play.
And Plaid, what are your objections to the deal?
Well, variously, we're really concerned about the withdrawal of powers from Cardiff. And, that's the minutiae of how it'll be worked out. But we're not at the table. There's going to be a joint committee, for example. I asked the Secretary of State, the new one, yesterday, what representation will there be from the devolved governments? And he said, well, that's something that we are going to look at. So we're not sufficiently involved at the moment.
And the SNP's problems with the deal and the agreement?
I mean, much the same, that the Scottish Parliament has been cut out of all of this process. The will of the Scottish people has not been respected. And furthermore, when you look at the power grab within all of this, there's a real risk that powers that the Scottish Parliament has taken for its own will be brought back down here indefinitely, and we don't have any reassurance from the government.
What could the government give you to buy an abstention, maybe, for you?
I don't think there's anything at this stage that they could do, because at the moment the deal is inadequate. No deal is obviously far from ideal as well, and puts a huge amount of things at risk. But the middle ground that the SNP have asked for all along in this process is to stay in the customs union and to stay in the single market, because that would give us some degree of protection. It's the least worst option in all of this.
Thank you all very much indeed. That's all from All Out Politics for today. Please join us again tomorrow. Coming up next, more on Sky News as MPs prepare for the big debate.